Hi, everybody. It's Calico again. Um, I just need to say for myself, this is part of my healing is to do these videos because it really is showing me any little area that I'm still holding on to. I am right. It's coming up and I'm getting an opportunity to clear it. And, this is the physics of healing the mind. It is the physics. Anything that I'm still harboring that is making anything wrong in the world is going to come up, and I'm going to get many opportunities to beat myself up over it. Okay. So today, for your excitement, I am going to talk about the shootout at the Laughing Palomino. Now, the Laughing Palomino, as I shared the last video, was a property that I built a big barn on, and I lived upstairs. My animals lived downstairs, and it was my idea of perfection in the world. Okay. Unfortunately, I'd put it above God. So I was happiest at the Laughing Palomino, and just leave me alone. I'm happy. And that's not the nature of the world. The world is everything is a lesson I must learn in order to really get how of my perfection, my perfection. Okay. So everything is a lesson I would learn. Just really tattoo that on the inside of your eyelids. Um, the lessons that we're getting are to return us to the loving state that we were prior to birth. I mean, I call it God. I call God is love. Use whatever words. Don't get caught up in words. For me, God is love, and I was born out of love. I'm a loving thought in the mind of God. I have never left being a loving thought in the mind of God. And this whole world is my opportunity to work through my mind to get back to that mindful state of I'm still a loving thought in the mind of God, and everything is perfect. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing right, even. So, um, and this is a no exception, okay? No exceptions to this, period. No matter what you're seeing, as much as your mind is wanting to tell you this is wrong, this is just so wrong. This morning I don't know, it was one of those ads that flew up on Google at some point that said some 14-year-old shot up a high school and killed people. And and all I thought for myself was that's pretty big fear. And I want to set this up before. Fear is, fear is deadly. Okay, I'm going to say that fear is deadly. And if you don't think that, then just see how much do you see your life as linear and that it's going to end in death. It's deadly, and that's fear. Okay, so this awakening into the true persona of who you are eliminates fear, all fear. So yeah, the movie's going to end, and at some point I'm going to walk out of the theater. Maybe have some popcorn left over. Who knows? But no exceptions. This is where it needs to be rigorous, and this is where I encourage silence, because then you can start seeing what you're thinking. Because if you're doing silence, don't do it unconsciously. Do it very consciously. What am I thinking? And if you can't come up with 10 judgments, if you're just starting this, I'd say more like 50 or 100 a day, you're probably not paying any attention to what you're thinking. Okay. So there you go. We are perfect. We're perfect. We're perfect. And anything that happens in the illusion, it's just bait I'm giving to myself to see if I still believe in my perception of the linear world. Okay. And this is where I've got to be uncompromising. Someone the other day was saying here at Namaste, oh, so and so isn't going with us because they have some body issue going on. And I asked her, I said, please don't share that with me because I'm not really interested. Let's just say she's not going, and that's enough. But to share her story of her suffering is not helpful for me. Okay. And and probably not helpful for you, but you'll know that when you get there. Okay. And the way out of this is to accept the atonement often, 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 a lot, a lot, a lot, all the time, all the time, all the time. And accepting the atonement is to really know that you're the one that's projecting this. You're the one that's believing in this, and you're the only one that can unwind this. So the extremes of fear, because again, the foreclosure that Chase was putting me, or no, that I was putting myself in, really, but Chase was setting up, was my bait. Okay. I had spent 7 years fighting them, trying to talk to someone, proving that I was right and they were wrong. And my house was the bait. If I didn't get them to see it my way, my house would no longer be, quote unquote, my house. And that took a lot. There was a lot going on. And at some point, I saw just how involved this got, because I got too far into fear. And the fear was, they're going to come and take my house, which is all my money, and yada yada yada. They I fluff up. I say, fear fluffs up eventually, and the only one that can unfluff it is me. And taking one fear at a time, and just examining it and seeing, is this true? Is this really true? And yes, I could say, yes, they're taking my house, but is it really true in the bigger perspective of my life? What's my priority? The peace of God. Okay, so I'm going to have to let something go in order to reestablish the peace of God, because I wasn't there. I was still too committed to being right. And that's accepting the atonement, asking for help. With these big ones, you have to ask for help. And for me, I use the term Holy Spirit. It's a familiar term to me. It's a Catholic term, but I use it as something great. Holy Spirit is my big mind. It's the mind that knows the truth of who I am and holds tight to me reestablishing that truth. Okay. So accepting the atonement for me is asking Holy Spirit for help. Help me to see this differently. That's all. And it's all. And then sometimes you have to repeat that prayer. Oh, I've repeated it at least 100 times a day, because that's the commitment that's required to changing my mind sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the laws of chaos, because the shootout at the Laughing Palomino was a perfect example of the laws of chaos. And I'm just going to start with a paragraph here from the Course in Miracles, chapter 23, the laws of chaos. He has a whole chapter. Jesus wrote a whole chapter on the laws of chaos, because it's linear life. And if you're just trying to make a better life, you're just sugarcoating shit, and let it go and look at what you're really thinking. So the laws of chaos can be brought to light through, though never understood. Chaotic laws are hardly meaningful. They mean nothing. And therefore, out of reason's sphere, I couldn't reason away Chase taking my house, because it didn't make sense. I was right and they were wrong. That was my problem. Yet they appear to be an obstacle to reason and to truth. The truth is, I was setting this up so I would move out of a place of being very comfortable into the world where I needed to be, because I needed to see that, no, is there anything safe in life? No. What's my fear? Not being safe in life. Okay, can I trust God to go into that world and trust God enough to know that I'm not going to be harmed by it? Okay. Let us then look upon them calmly. I underline calmly. Let us then look upon them calmly. I was anything but calm with this whole process of foreclosure, that we may look beyond them, understanding what they are, not what they would maintain. They were maintaining my insanity of something being taken away from that wasn't right, that was wrong, clearly wrong, and I could prove it. Ugh. I can so see it. I mean, this is the healing of Calico right now. So let us look upon them calmly, that we may look beyond them, understanding what they are, not what they would maintain. It is essential it be understood what they are for, because it is their purpose to make meaningless. It was my purpose to make them meaningless. When I gave them all this meaning, they're wrong. They're wrong. They're stealing my house. Oh, I had a lot of them. So anyway, I had to get beyond, I had to look beyond what I was making them mean. They're wrong. And understand there was something much greater for me to learn from this. It is essential it be understood that they are for what they are for, because it is their purpose to make meaningless and to attack the truth. Me making Chase Manhattan wrong was attacking the truth that all I wanted was the peace of God. That's it. Okay, and to attack the truth. Here are the laws that rule the world you made, and yet they govern nothing, and they need not be broken, merely looked upon and gone beyond. Okay? And that's what the Laughing Palomino did for me in a rather exciting way. So I can't remember what it, I was talking to a lot of people about the foreclosure. I was calling politicians. I mean, I was getting the word out. It was so much so that some lawyer in Connecticut heard about me, and he called me and he took me on as a lawyer, not as a class action. And he was going to take me to court against Chase Manhattan. So I was talking to a lot of people, a lot of quote unquote big names in the linear, okay, in the illusion. I wasn't going to let this go. I'm Irish and I'm like a pit bull. When I see something wrong, man, I latch on, which is what I'd done my whole life with every underdog. Now I was starting to see myself as the underdog, and I was not going to let go. So I was setting up a massive law of chaos to hit me in the face. So one day, and it was interesting, I was having some physical stuff going on. I went to the dentist, and it turned out one of my front teeth fell out in the office. And so that set up. So I was minus a front tooth. You know, he packed it as well as he could, and he said, we'll fix this. We'll start working on this. So I went home, and the day before, I had called some politician, and I think I started crying that they're taking my home, and it's just not right. I was hanging on to this. And so the next day, I had my tooth fell out in the dentist's office. And then I went home, and I was making mashed potatoes because I was hungry and I couldn't eat anything solid. So I had some mashed potatoes, and I was just taking them to my table. And you have to understand, I lived above my barn. So there was a steep walkway coming up to the barn, and there were windows everywhere. There was just windows all around. So I was taking my mashed potatoes to sit down at the table and eat. And I saw coming, this is out in the middle of nowhere, you know, I could see no one from my place. Up the front steps, I saw the tip of an AK-47. And I knew AK-47s from Africa, and they scared the hell out of me. I wasn't a big one on guns. And I must say, just maybe a couple weeks prior to this happening, I did have a gun, because one of the things I thought it would be helpful for was if an animal got into trouble at my house, I could put them down quickly. So I did have a gun, but at some point it didn't feel comfortable. I sold the gun. And so by this point, I no longer had a gun in my house, which I'm extremely grateful for. So I saw the tip of this AK-47 coming up. Another thing you need to understand, my front door, that was all glass too, didn't have a lock. So it was never locked. It was always open. So this AK-47 came up, and there were like 4 different guys with them. And they stood aiming their weapon at me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Um, so I started thinking, I've got to call everyone I know. And I knew some city councilors and county councilors, and because I'd been very, very active politically. So I thought, well, maybe someone can help me here. I don't know what this is about. And it turns out, because I started crying about losing this house, this young woman, and I must thank her, she said, she's going to kill herself. And the reality was, the truth be known, I was getting close to that because I didn't, and my whole life, I had attempted suicide my whole life. I never wanted to be here, did not want to be here. In high school, I think I tried suicide 4 or 5 times, ended up in the hospital about 3. And, it was just confusing. And I didn't know why I was here. And this is exactly why I was here. But I had to leave my home. I had to get out of that location of isolation and join the world again and really deal with the real issue. Was I had a lot of judgments about many things, and none of it was helpful. Okay. So and here's, okay, I want to just give you another little quote. Same chapter 23, Laws of Chaos. The first chaotic law is that the truth is different for everyone. Okay, so you're probably listening to this story as a story about someone else, but guess what? It works just as truthfully in your world. Okay. If you're not seeing judgments everywhere and asking to accept the atonement on them, to see them through love, you're setting yourself up for stuff to happen. Okay. I'm clear that the cancer that happened right after this, I was diagnosed, and the tooth falling out and everything, was the fact that I was so angry, but I couldn't see how to accept the atonement on it because I was right. And it was this belief that no one's listening to me. That was a big belief. No one's listening to me, and I'm right. So there was a thought in mind of suicide is always an option up until that point in my life. So the first chaotic law is that truth is different for everyone. Like all these principles, this one maintains that each is separate and has a different set of thoughts that set him off from others. The 14-year-old that shoots up a high school was no different than me. He was wrong. Chase Manhattan was wrong. And there is no wrong. There's only lessons we would learn. That's all there is. So if you can hear yourself saying anywhere in your mind, this is wrong, you've got some judgments to work on. And I clearly invite you, deal with it, because I see this as the end of all illness, all wars. If we could just start seeing, we're the ones that are projecting all this nonsense. I was the one projecting a 14-year-old shoots up a high school, until I got to the point where now it doesn't faze me because I see it's a lesson many would learn, not just this 14-year-old and his family and the school. It's all of us. Anytime we're thinking chaos or making someone wrong, we're setting it up for occurring in the linear so we get the lesson. It's only till we get the lesson that stuff starts turning around. Unfortunately, it's like turning around a huge, you know, barge. And it's like we can set, I want the peace of God. We set the coordinates to turn back to the loving mind. And it takes a while for that barge to turn around. So you may lose more teeth, you may have more chaos. It's just stay on course, no exceptions. I want the peace of God, and I want to see my involvement in what is keeping this in place. This principle evolves from the belief there is a hierarchy of illusions. So my shootout at the Laughing Palomino may look more like you're making your husband wrong because he's driving you crazy. There's no hierarchy. Make wrong is make wrong, period. No exceptions. Okay. And this hierarchy of illusions, some are more valuable and therefore true. Chase was stealing my house, and I could prove it. I just couldn't get anyone to hear me. um, okay, each one establishes this for himself and makes it true by his attack on what another values. All right. I was attacking the values that were saying I was wrong. I was attacking Chase Manhattan, who was saying, sorry, lady, you're wrong. We're taking your house. Okay. You have to give up fighting. This is also from chapter 23. Think how this seems to interfere with the first principle of miracles. For this establishes degrees of truth among illusions, making it seem that some of them are harder to overcome than others. No, they're all the same. The reality is, though, we have to start practicing this. And, this was one of the ones I first started practicing with, and it was a doozy. It was a doozy. And all I can say is there's heaven on the other side of this, but you have to want to get out of hell. And you have to see that all miracles occur in mind. It's my perception that's setting up hell. And the only way to unwind that is forgive myself for thinking it. Okay. Um, okay, so the AK-47's walking up to my door. There's three guys holding them, pointing their weapons at me through the glass, and I'm losing it. I'm losing it. What the hell are you here for? And they weren't talking. And so I was calling all these people that I knew, and there was a county counselor that I called, and she looked into it and she said, okay, look, they're here for your protection. I'm thinking, well, they can put their guns down to start. But the reality was I was setting myself up to get a very powerful lesson for myself. And so I talked to her, and these guys, I said, tell them to go back down. I can't be looking at an AK-47 and even have a clear thought. So they left. And at some point, because there was no, one of the gifts that I said, oh, I have no cell phone reception, which I was really happy about. I made cell phones wrong. Anyway, so I went out at some point because my city councilor friend wanted to talk to them. And I went out there, and there was a negotiator. I mean, there were a lot of police. There were police cars. I could see my drive up to the main road, and they were just lined with police cars. And they said there was an ambulance up there, and they wanted to take me into protective custody because they thought I was going to do harm to myself. And I mean, none of this made sense to me at the time. I was just like living chaos and fearing what was going to happen. So I went out to talk to the negotiator, and I said, you don't have to worry about me. You can leave. I'm not wanting your help. And they said, we want to take you in for a psych eval, a psychological evaluation, which I started laughing at. And it was like, okay, I'll come in Monday on my own. You can leave now. And there was a lot of me running around trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How am I going to fix this? And the negotiator was not leaving. And he was a middle-aged man. Every one of them holding AK-47s, I think were under 20, the age of 20. They were like these babies. And really what I get now is we teach these principles of fear from birth on. So by the time kids are 14 years old, they know about weapons, and they're just going to blow people away thinking that that'll shut them up. And it's like, all I can say is, and this is for all of us, if we're projecting fear of anything, COVID was a beautiful example of it. Fear was rampant. And it's like that just keeps fear alive. It's like the inquiry is to, what am I really fearing here? And then take it on that course of, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently and see that, well, I don't trust God. I don't trust God's going to take care of me. This is an illness that many people are getting, and many good people. When I got the cancer, that was my big thing. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, it's because we're committed to waking up. And so the commitment is going to show up as usually some kind of chaos that we need to accept the atonement on. So it went on for several hours. It was, them versus me. And at one point, I walked out to talk to the negotiator from my balcony, and someone shot a taser at me. And it was like, that was all it took for me. I went screaming into my house. And since my door had an issue with locking or even closing completely, as I ran into the house, I slammed the door behind me, but it bounced open. So they could come in now. And so and my whole living space was open except for the closet in the bathroom. And I had already run by the bathroom. And so I ran into the closet, slammed the door, and just hunkered down. And that's where I kept my gun. So it was like, and I remember thinking, thank God the gun's not in here, or they'd be blasting this door, or I'd be blasting them. Who knew? So I was in the closet, and they broke the closet door down on me and dragged me out to the living room, put cuffs on me behind my back, and then proceeded to take me out at gunpoint to the county road where the ambulance was waiting for me. And I was furious. It was winter, it was cold. I didn't have boots on. I mean, and the animals were running around. Oh, that was one thing that really pissed me off. I had a really sweet three-legged dog. He was kind of a Dalmatian, and sweet, sweet dog. And I saw him at one point because I could see the road. There were cops down there in front of one of the cars, and he was sitting up for them. He was being so sweet to them. And I thought, et tu, Bruto? My dog is making nice to these assholes. And the reality was, again, it was my lesson to see. My dog was giving me the lesson. Be nice, Calico. They're not going to harm you. They're not going to harm you. God's got you. Okay. So walked me out, took me into the ambulance, took me into oh God, the hospital. They put me in I don't know, it was a room without windows, had a video cam. They gave me something, a gown to put on. I mean, it was like, are you serious? And I could see there was a man watching me, and they said, just strip and put the gown on. And that made me, everything was making me angry. And at some point, I stopped talking. I stopped talking, which was my mother's way of handling really horrible things, is she'd stop talking. So I thought, well, anger isn't getting me anywhere. My father was the rager, so I'm going to shut up. I did. And at some point, and it must have been around 3 in the morning, there was this dear, sweet little, I don't know what her title was, emergency counselor or something. And she came in, and we sat there together, and she said, just tell me what's going on. So I shared all this stuff and about all of the 7 years and all the incredible stuff that I'd been through. And then I finally just, finished. And she said, you're not angry. No, you're not crazy. That's what she said. You're not crazy. You're angry. And I thought, yep, I am. That's exactly it. Because I can't seem to get through to anyone. And so she went back, and on her word, I mean, she talked to everybody. She talked to everybody on my behalf, saying, this woman has gone through 7 years of hell, and she's not going to hurt anybody, and you need to let her go. And so around, I don't know, she was gone for a couple of hours, and about 5:30, I didn't have a phone, and cell phones were all the rage. And so she comes in, gives me my clothes, the nurse, and says, okay, you can get dressed and you can come out and use our phone. Well, I didn't know who to call. I had no idea who to call. I didn't have numbers in my head. And so I called the radio. I was working at a public radio station. I did a lot of volunteer work for KSFR in Santa Fe. Shout out to KSFR. And the executive director was a close friend of mine. And I knew she'd get in early and she'd review. Well, she got in early. She called me and she said, "What the hell is going on?" And I told her the story and she said, "Well, just wait. I'm coming to get you." And so she came and she got me and she drove me back to my house, which is about 15 miles outside of Santa Fe. She heard the whole story and she sat with me while I wrote it all down. I mean, there's a whole lot more detail that I'm leaving out. You get the gist of it. Um, and she said, "Because you're going to forget this and you need to," I mean, in her mind, she was saying, "You're going to get a lawyer and you're going to fight this." And at this point, I was just getting, if I am angry, I have got to see this differently because this is not helpful. And it's getting me to the edges of chaos that can be dangerous, that results in a 14-year-old shooting out a high school, and I knew I was at that place and I thought, we need to turn this around and we need to turn this around in a big way. And so the first person I called after she left, she sat with me for an hour while I wrote everything down. And when she left, I called Kit, my friend, who basically really forced the issue of seeing everything is something I am making up in my mind. So I told him the whole story and he just came back with, "You are quite a creative thinker." And and that's when I dug into A Course in Miracles. Like, I was at the end of, there were going to be people, it was like my lawyer, I don't know if I said this before, my lawyer in Connecticut, who I absolutely loved, he was having trouble getting any judicial system to take on any lawsuit against a bank. He had filed it in New York, and all the judicial systems were supporting the banks. And so he thought the best idea was to take it to New Jersey. God bless New Jersey. They'll file anybody, bank or no bank. And so he had done this. Well, just before this happened, he'd called me and said, "Calico," and we'd been working together for at least 2 years. He said, "I don't know what to tell you." He said, "I got a call from the Attorney General of New Mexico at the time, who was a very beloved Democrat, who told him that if he didn't drop my case, he he would never practice law again, that this attorney general would make sure he never practiced law again." That's when you get close to the fringes of chaos that really show up in world wars and shootouts and all this. And I knew that. And it's like, so I just said, "Look, I love you and you drop me because we're going to end this now. I'm no longer fighting this. I'm going to leave. They can have the house. I'll get rid of, find homes for my animals. We're done. I'm done fighting." I know that, and I was a book studier, of Course in Miracles, and it was like, this is called the activation of A Course in Miracles. It's like I really need to put these thoughts that Jesus is sharing into complete action, and he got it. We had a very really loving conversation. Checked in on his kids, and and it was over. And it was probably, oh God, about a week later, I went in for a biopsy. And that was a whole thing also. And it was, the end result of that, we'll talk about the cancer later, but it was stage 4 cancer. It spread everywhere. And, there you go. It was, they said, yeah, well, we'll talk about that in future episodes. So anyway, I really put into action, this is the way it needs to be. And I need to say this because I loved my course groups. I went to 4 or 5 of them a week. But when I said I was dropping everything, there were those in the course groups that said, "You've got to fight for it, Calico. They're wrong." And this is what I'm saying. This is The only way is to let go of anything's wrong. There is no right, there is no wrong. There only is me thinking that something's not okay. All right. Um, um, yeah, I'm just gonna back up just a second to the second law of chaos, which might be helpful for some. The second law of chaos, dear indeed to every worshiper of sin. Me seeing Chase Manhattan as wrong was me seeing them as a sinner. Okay? This is really good. There is no sin. There's no sin. There's nothing wrong. There's only a lesson I would learn. And this was a particularly impactful lesson for me because I'm going to read, go back. The second law of chaos, dear indeed to every worshiper of sin, is that each one must sin and therefore deserves attack and death. And this is not only to them, the 14-year-old shooting out the high school, or Calico making Chase Manhattan wrong. It is on my body as well. And so me seeing Chase as wrong, as a sinner, they deserve death. Guess what? That's a projection. They deserve death. Who was I saying that against? Myself. So the projection of cancer came directly out of this. They deserve to die. I deserve to die. And this is, oh God, just get what you can out of this and start applying any negative thoughts that aren't loving and accept the atonement. Ask Holy Spirit, your mind that is the big mind that loves only, for help in seeing all these beliefs differently. This principle, closely related to the first, is the demand that errors call for punishment and not correction. And this is, if you think about it, our whole world is based on the judicial system. So me even attempting to take Chase to court was me seeing they deserve to die. They're sinning. And I'm going to take them through the judicial system, and I'm going to prove to them how wrong they are. I mean, this is, there's a lot of areas we need to completely turn around in our thinking. And our thinking that the judicial system, which calls for punishment against sin, is insanity itself. It is the laws of chaos. It's a system that will keep itself alive by making people wrong and punishing them for it. Okay, just something to think about. And this is the end. This is text chapter 21. Damnation is your judgment on yourself, and this you will project upon the world. Think about that. Damnation is your judgment on yourself, and this you will project upon the world. I'm clear. I created cancer as a way out. Again, I really was into getting out of this life. And cancer was an acceptable way of doing it. Oh, you've got terminal cancer. Oh, that's too bad. Yuck. No. It's like, it would have been helpful if someone could have, well, Kit did, actually. He slapped me in the face, said, honey, you're creating this, and if you can't see it, I can't help you. Okay? So that's the shootout at the Laughing Palomino. It was probably a singular day that was so helpful for me, but at the time was just chaotic and traumatic. But when I was able to sit quietly and know that there's nothing wrong. There is no wrong. There's only a lesson I would learn that helped me turn it around and put me on the path that I needed to be on, which is this one. Okay. So until next time, I don't know what we're talking about next time. Well, it'll be a surprise for all of us. Anyway, you guys have a great day, and start looking at where you're making someone wrong, where you're judging a situation. If you read a news article that, like a 14-year-old shooting up a high school, love them. This is not about making anyone wrong or agreeing with someone's grief. It's to see these are lessons we're all giving to ourselves, and none of them are simple and easy. They end in death because we believe in death. As soon as we're born, we believe in death. So we have to undo that one. It's a big one. And the way to undo it is to start accepting the atonement on all these thoughts we're thinking, but we're too embarrassed to admit that we're thinking, or we're still thinking that they're right, that I'm right and they're wrong. Okay, that's a big belief. Okay, love you. Till next time. Happy trails. Now, where is